The tea was still warm, long after its drinker was gone. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Tell me where you're listening from. This community grows with every voice. Your comments always brighten my day. Let's begin. If you ask me, a Tuesday morning ought to behave like a Tuesday morning. That means eggs, toast, Wolfe muttering over the orchids upstairs until 11, and no visitors darkening our doorstep before I've had a chance to check the mail. But the world rarely consults me. So naturally, that was the morning our bell rang at 10:30 sharp. I was at my desk in the office, going through the mail myself. Mostly circulars and a bill for a rug cleaning service Wolfe had never once used, when the chime went off. Wolfe's voice floated down from the plant rooms, heavy and flat as a man reciting bad poetry. Archie, which was his way of reminding me that I wasn't paid for my decorative value. The fellow at the door looked as though he'd already lost an argument with the day. Mid-50s, trim suit, steady enough shoulders, but his fingers shook when he passed me his card. Charles Fenwick, Fenwick Imports, East 38th Street. He wasn't the type to rattle easy, which made the trembling noticeable. I let him into the office, parked him in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's, and told him he'd have to wait until Wolfe descended from Olympus. He nodded, holding his hat like it might fly off on its own. When Wolfe did come down, 3 minutes after 11, on schedule, looking as though gravity bent itself for his convenience, he eyed Fenwick the way he eyes an unexpected dish at dinner. Skeptical, but willing to taste if the aroma justifies it. He lowered himself into the big chair behind the desk, arranged his bulk, and reached for the yellow silk handkerchief in his breast pocket. "Well?" Wolfe said, and I swear he could make that one syllable sound like both a courtesy and a rebuke. Fenwick leaned forward, hat still gripped, knuckles pale. "Mr. Wolfe, I may sound foolish, but this morning, in my office, someone brought me tea. I drink it every day at 10. I set the cup down, signed a paper, and when I lifted it again, it was still warm. Too warm, I glanced at Wolfe. If a man wanted to waste Wolfe's time, this was the way to do it, with tea temperature. I was halfway to deciding how fast I could usher Fenwick out before Wolfe exploded when Wolfe's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. Fenwick swallowed. It wasn't the tea that unsettled me. It was the fact that I'd left the cup untouched on my desk when I stepped out for 5 minutes. When I came back, it had been lifted, replaced, and reheated. Someone had been in my office. Someone who wanted me to know it. That made me pause. Wolfe tapped the edge of his blotter with one finger, his lids lowering. He did not dismiss Fenwick, which meant this wasn't going to be as simple as telling the man to buy a new kettle. Fenwick's voice dropped. "Mr. Wolfe, I believe it was a warning. I import rare porcelains. Last month I acquired a teacup said to have belonged to Empress Josephine. There are collectors who would stop at nothing. And yesterday I refused an offer. Today someone wanted to remind me that my office is not secure. The cup is still in my safe, but—" He stopped, finally letting the hat rest on his knees. Wolfe inhaled deeply, as though measuring the man's sincerity in cubic feet. Then he said, "Pray." A teacup, I thought that was the end of it. But Wolfe didn't send him away. He closed his eyes, as if considering an opera he hadn't heard before. Then he murmured, "Why come to me?" "Because," Fenwick said, "if I report this to the police, they'll laugh. If I hire an ordinary detective, they'll look for burglars. But you will understand that the warmth of a teacup can speak louder than a shout." For the first time that morning, Wolfe opened his eyes fully and looked at Fenwick. Not at his shaking hands, not at the card on the desk, but directly into him. Then Wolfe reached for his bell cord and gave it a tug. Fritz appeared a moment later. Wolfe said, "Tea." "Oolong." 2 cups, I figured then that we were in for it. When Wolfe drinks tea at 11:30 in the morning, the world has gone off its hinges. Fritz brought the tray like he was transporting the Magna Carta. Pot, 2 cups, and a little silver timer that only comes out when Wolfe has decided a leaf is innocent until brewed. Wolfe didn't look at Fenwick while Fritz poured. He watched the steam pot company with the spout and settle into the room like a guest we hadn't invited. Then he said, "Archie," and I passed 1 cup to Fenwick and kept the other for Wolfe. I don't drink tea unless it's medicinal or a bribe, so my hands were available for the notebook. "Describe the circumstance precisely," Wolfe said. "Time, interval, positions of objects." Fenwick was steadier with something to occupy him. "My desk at the office. 10 o'clock, as always. I stepped out to speak with the visiting appraiser, Mr. Pike, Julian Pike, from Consolidated Assurance. 5 minutes, perhaps 6. When I returned, the cup I had not touched was warmer than when it was poured. Not just warm, fresh. But the surface film was undisturbed. Wolfe cupped his saucer like the thing owed him money. "Fritz." Fritz took the 2nd cup back to the kitchen. We heard the soft clink of porcelain and the faint hiss of flame. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. "An untouched surface may retain its meniscus," he murmured, more to himself than to us. "But reheating from beneath, no agitation on top." The intruder wished to assert delicate access. "Clumsy men chill what they touch." "You're saying he warmed it from below?" I asked. "Not with his hands. That would take a blacksmith. A desk lighter, an alcohol lamp, an electric mug heater," Wolfe said, "or the warming drawer in a credenza. He wished to say, I can be under your hand without your hand knowing." "Bah." He opened his eyes. "Names." Fenwick set the cup down. "My office manager, Evangeline Rook, Evie. Competent, loyal, but she disapproved of the purchase, thought it too risky. Mr. Pike, the insurance man, as I said. He was there to evaluate the premium on the Josephine teacup. Dr. Beatrice north of the Met had visited the day before to examine provenance. She called at 9:40 to say she'd like to see it again today. A rival collector, Lionel Papet, came yesterday with a final offer. I refused him, and he hesitated. Selina Vale, patron. She funded part of the acquisition and expects first refusal on resale in agreeable circle, Wolfe said. 5 points on a pentagon, each stringing the others like beads. He shifted in the chair, which is his version of a cartwheel. "Who has the combination to your safe?" "Just me," Fenwick said, and then, like any honest man eager to be believed, he added too much. "And Evie, in case of emergency." "Addresses," I told him, pen moving. "Phones." "Any peculiar smells? Perfume? Cologne? Cigar? Mr. Papey smokes Egyptian cigarettes. Dr. North? Nothing. Mr. Pike? Aftershave. Evie wears a light jasmine. And Miss Vale? Always vetiver." The bell rang. Wolfe closed his eyes as if the sound were an indecent proposal. I went. The woman on the stoop was 30, tidy, clever eyes that took everything in and kept half. She gave me a card, Evangeline Rook, Fenwick Imports. "I shouldn't have come without calling," she said, brushing past my objection like lint. "But Charles disappeared at 10, after 10, and the insurance man was waiting, and oh." She saw him through the doorway and eased, like a dancer returning to a known mark. "You didn't tell me you were coming here." "I didn't know I was," Fenwick said. "I was compelled." "By a warm teacup," I said helpfully. She gave me a look that could frost a window. "By the fact that someone was in his office," she said. "Mr. Wolfe, I apologize for barging in, but Mr. Pike was in a mood to panic, and Papey called twice this morning to say his goodwill was not eternal. I thought if Mr. Fenwick had come to see you, you should have the note." "Note?" Wolfe said, opening his eyes. She extracted a folded sheet from her bag with 2 fingers as if it were venomous. I took it to Wolfe. Neat typing, no letterhead, a single line. "Accept the offer. Your cup is a burden you can't afford. No signature, no threat, no date. Just a thumbprint of arrogance. The envelope? I asked. No postmark. It was slipped under our door before we arrived. I found it at 7:50. Paper? Wolfe said, and I handed it back to Fritz, who had returned with the second cup. Bonded? Common, but decent, he reported. Stationery. Store-grade. Fritz set the cup on the blotter beside the first and, without touching the surface, warmed it with a small electric plate he'd produced from somewhere under his virtues. He removed it after 30 seconds and nudged it toward Wolfe. Wolfe tilted his head and inhaled, not the fragrance of the oolong, but something else. Note, Archie, reheated yields a thin metallic ghost when the source is electric. Alcohol gives a faint sweet. Mr. Fenwick? Fenwick leaned, sniffed, blinked. Yes, that's what it was. Electric good, Wolfe said. An office convenience rather than an improvisation. He looked at Evie Rook. You disapproved of the acquisition. Why? It's questionable provenance and shameless vanity, she said crisply. Half the time Josephine's porcelain is Josephine's the way a Beardsley is Beardsley. It attracts men who need their dining room to lie for them. And women? I asked. Her eyes moved to the note in my hand. Women don't write like that, she said. Women say what they mean and then pretend they didn't. Phooey, Wolfe said. Sex does not monopolize stupidity. Mr. Goodwin, obtain Mr. Pape's address and Mr. Pike's. Dr. North, too. Miss Vale's residence as well as any club she infests. He returned his gaze to Fenwick. You're safe where? In my private office, Fenwick said. Behind a framed export license. Combination dial. We had the lock service last month. By whom? Ridge and Mayer. Are you in arrears to anyone? Wolfe asked. Taxes, favors, affections, Evie Rook answered. We pay our bills. As to affections, Miss Vale assumes her money entitles her to certainty. Mr. Pape assumes his money entitles him to control. Dr. North assumes her museum entitles her to sainthood. Mr. Pike assumes his tables entitle him to prophecy. That leaves me, who assumes nothing but work. Fenwick looked at her gratefully, and then away, which told me as much as I needed about where affections lived. The phone rang. I took it. A male voice, nasal and insistent. Archie Goodwin? Lionel Pape. Inform Mr. Wolfe that I have reconsidered. My offer stands until 5 this afternoon. After that, I involve counsel. How noble, I said. Do your Egyptian cigarettes come with a fuse, or do you light them yourself? I warn you, he snapped. You're dabbling in a market that eats amateurs. I only dabble in amateurs when the professionals are boring. I asked for his address. He gave it, Sutton Place, with the view you rent to intimidate people without saying a word. When I hung up, Evie was already fishing another card from her bag. Dr. North called again while I was in the cab, she said. She wants another look at the teacup today. She was eager. Eagerness, Wolfe said, is a corrosive when applied to objects. He looked at Fenwick. Fees are 12,000, retainer 2. We commence. Upon receipt, it was as casual as telling Fritz to pass the salt. Fenwick didn't blink. He took his checkbook out as if it had volunteered. Evie watched him write and did not nod or frown. Fritz, having proved his point about reheating, reclaimed the electric plate like a conjurer ending a trick. When the ink was dry, Wolfe tucked the check under a paperweight shaped like a toad. Mr. Goodwin will begin by visiting Mr. Pape, then Mr. Pike. He will sniff their breath and their words and return with what he has not wasted. You, Mr. Fenwick, will go back to your office and touch nothing. Miss Rook will allow no one into your private room, and she will keep the staff's mouths shut by whatever means she usually employs. Evie's chin lifted a 1/4 inch. Fear, she said. And payroll. Excellent, Wolfe said. He raised his cup at last and sipped. and while I wouldn't say a choir sang, the silence in the room got cleaner around the edges. "The man who warmed your tea wished to announce not theft but competence," he said. "He has taken your measure without taking your property, which is impertinence distilled. He hopes you will capitulate to the insinuation that you cannot defend what you value. That is abominable." "Then we can defend it?" Fenwick asked. "We can make it costly for him not to defend himself," Wolfe said. "Warmth is a confession. He has told us he prefers suggestion to force. We will be less polite. I got my hat." Evie looked at me like she wanted to insist on coming along, and thought better of it. Fenwick stood, steadier now that he had been priced. The brownstone had been disturbed. Footsteps that weren't ours, voices in registers the rooms weren't tuned to. But Wolfe had settled into the kind of comfort he only gets when a fence has crossed his threshold, and he has decided to make it regret the journey. I took a cab because the weather had decided to be theatrical and the sidewalks were booked. Sutton Place is where men go to prove that height isn't the only way to look down on people. Lionel Pape's doorman gave me the kind of inspection usually reserved for produce and, finding no bruises, waved me toward the elevator. Pape's place had the clean smell of fresh money pretending to be old. He was waiting in a lounge the size of a minor embassy, in a suit that wanted you to guess the tailor and be wrong. "You have a view," I said, because it was truer than nice to meet you. "I purchase leverage," he said, with a little nod that meant the clever line was for him, not me. He offered Egyptian cigarettes from a lacquered box. I took one to be sociable and not because I like coughing. "Your call was full of charm," I said. "Consider this my bouquet." "Tell Mr. Wolfe," he said, settling in, "that I respect his judgment and am trying to save an amateur from himself." "Which amateur? Fenwick or you?" He smiled like a shark, considering vegetarianism. "The cup is problematic. The marks are right, but the story is wrong. Josephine's pieces scattered across Europe in 3 distinct channels. Fenwick's came down a 4th, invented by men who tell lies for a living. And you want to pay for the privilege of rescuing him?" "I want to prevent a scandal that would depress my entire market," he said, "and I prefer the cup in my hands, where I can manage its story." He lit his cigarette and exhaled authority. "Miss Vale will grow bored with her philanthropy in a week. Dr. North will grow scruples in a day. I am the constant. You're also in a hurry," I said. 5 p.m., you said. What happens at 5? Do the Egyptian gods reclaim their cigarettes? At 5, my counsel files a claim for injunctive relief to prevent transfer of contested property, he said. I would prefer not to. Litigation is barbaric. Deals are civilized. Deals that include typed notes pushed under doors? I held his eyes. He didn't flinch. That wasn't me, he said. I don't write anonymously. If I wish a man to accept an offer, I tell him so with champagne and a pen. Where were you at 10 this morning? With my counsel, Mr. Greeley. You may call him. We were drafting the injunction I hope not to use. He gestured toward a credenza where a neat stack of folders lined up like soldiers. And since you're cataloging furnishings, no, I do not own an electric cup warmer. I didn't ask, I said. But since we're volunteering facts, how did you know Mr. Pike was at Fenwick Imports? He allowed himself a millimeter of surprise. He carries the policy. When I raised concerns about provenance last week, I copied Consolidated Assurance. It is common sense that they would assess their exposure today. If you mean how I knew he was physically on the premises, Miss Vale telephoned me at 9:30 to say she was on her way there and had been told Pike was expected. Miss Vale spreads her good news widely. She considers herself a guardian of taste, he said, the kind of contempt only deep pockets can afford. Do you know what that means? She funds, she meddles, she wants to be painted into the provenance he showed me to the door with the politeness of a man who believes in prompt service, especially when he's providing the exit. I stuck his alibi and his dislike of anonymous notes in my head, along with the detail that Selina Vale and Lionel Pepe used the same clock. There is nothing so intimate as the overlap of two people's impatiences. Julian Pike had an office in Midtown that smelled like a new file cabinet. He was 5'8" of actuarial caution, with a tie that had learned to iron itself. His handshake was damp with the residue of a morning spent worrying. "I'm not authorized," he started, and I cut him off with a smile I reserved for timid obstructions. "You're authorized to breathe," I said. "Start there. You signed Tuesday, won't you? Arrived at Fenwick at what time?" 10 sharp, he said, glancing at a notebook as if the numbers might scold him. "Mr. Fenwick stepped out to fetch an invoice. Miss Rook had me wait in reception." 6 minutes. When Mr. Fenwick returned, he brought me into his private office and opened the safe. We did not remove the cup, we only verified that the safe contained something shaped like a cup, I said. "And you were there when his fresh tea announced that someone had been poking around." He blinked. He mentioned disquiet. He had the look of a man whose profession had taught him that admitting to unease is like leaving a window open in winter. For the record, Consolidated Assurance does not like disputed provenance. If Dr. North's second look reduces certainty, we will adjust the premium or decline the rider. "You're acquainted with Dr. North?" "Professionally. She is conscientious. Some curators like drama. She likes facts and Miss Vale, or Mr. Papet." "Miss Vale phones often," he said, "which in insurance is a diagnosis. She wanted a certificate naming her as loss payee if she bought the piece. I told her we would require a new appraisal. Mr. Papet sent us a letter over the weekend alleging forgery. I filed it and notified Mr. Fenwick. "And you?" I said. "What do you want?" "Lower exposure. I want not to pay a claim on an object everyone told me was troublesome," he said. And because he was honest, he added, "If Mr. Fenwick sells to Mr. Pepe, I will sleep." "Did you slip a note under Fenwick's door at dawn?" "No," he said too quickly for a rehearsed liar. "And I don't carry stationery before coffee." I let him off with a card and a warning that Wolfe preferred clients who didn't sneeze on their own case. On the way down, I phoned Wolfe. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Miss Vale first, then Dr. North. Miss Vale will attempt to intimidate you with self-confidence. Dr. North will attempt to seduce you with caution. Regard both as adulterants. Any advice for resisting?" "Eat lunch," he said, and hung up. Selina Vale's building wore its doormen like medals. The lobby had art that was meant to be seen from a car. She received me in a room the size of a verdict, in trousers that could cut glass and a blouse that had learned the trick of understatement. The air had that green, dry whisper of vetiver. "You're Wolfe's legs," she said, amused and approving. "How sturdy." "I get me through a day," I said. "You called Pape at 9:30 and told him Pike was on his way to Fenwick." "I called Pap at 9:30 and told him everything worth knowing," she said cheerfully. "Don't pout. Information is how grown-ups flirt." "You fund Fenwick," I said. "Was the cup your idea or his?" "Hers," she said, nodding toward an invisible audience of museums, rivals, and ghosts. "Josephine is a story. Men understand. They think it's about a woman's grace and a man's empire. I think it's about how objects teach people to tell the truth by making them lie first." "That note told the truth?" "That note told fear," she said, "which is an honest smell, if not an admirable one." "Were you near Fenwick's door at 7:50 this morning?" "I was near my Pilates instructor," she said. "Ask the instructor. He will happily perjure himself about my alibis. Mr. Goodwin, I want the cup in intelligent custody. If it's false, let's punish the liar. If it's true, let's keep it out of stupid hands. I don't care about money, which is why I usually get mine." She walked me to the elevator with the efficient kindness of a queen, making sure a messenger leaves with his head. I believed her about Pilates and not caring about money. which are both things wealthy people say when they're telling the truth and hoping you'll mistake it for arrogance. The Met was in its afternoon stride when I called and got Dr. Beatrice North in a corridor that sounded like marble pretending to be quiet. She agreed to 10 minutes in a staff lounge upstairs and gave them to me like a grant. Tall, a face that had been trained out of expression and had learned to compensate with eyes. "I examined the teacup yesterday," she said, before I had finished introducing my tie. I was 55% persuaded. "That's an odd number for confidence." "Confidence is not an integer," she said. "Today, I wanted to check a minute abrasion on the foot rim. If the glaze crawled there, it's a 19th century sin. If it didn't, then I will climb to 65. "You called at 9:40 to arrange another look," I said. "Who knew?" "Mr. Fenwick, Miss Rook, and my assistant." "Why? Do you imagine my interest breeds skullduggery?" "I imagine your interest breeds schedules," I said, "which breed opportunities." She considered that and allowed a micro-shrug. "Objects create behavior. It's why I love them and distrust them." She collected her 10 minutes back and left me with a vending machine and a thought. On the way downtown, I swung by Fenwick Imports. The floor men looked like men who kept inventories of their own sleep. Evie Rook posted herself at reception like an antibiotic. She didn't like me dropping in, which made me like dropping in. I didn't ask to see the safe. I didn't need to. On the wall behind her desk, a small electric plate sat under a porcelain mug, the kind you buy for chilly days and office morale. It was switched off, cold as a sermon, and none of my business, except that it was exactly the sort of harmless convenience a person with a taste for insinuation would appropriate for a performance about warmth. Evie followed my eyes and smiled without showing teeth. "We like our tea hot," she said. "So do our intruders," I said, and put Pape's alibi, Pike's nerves, Miss Vale's vetiver, and Dr. North's 65% in my pocket next to the draft of a hunch. It didn't feel like a weapon yet. It felt like a teacup. Fragile, convincing, and extremely useful if you knew where to put the heat. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the sky had decided to audition for melodrama, and Fritz had decided I needed lunch. Wolfe was at his desk with the same look he gives a recipe that insults butter. I fed him Pape's hauteur, Pike's clammy honesty, Miss Vale's vetiver and vocabulary, and Dr. North's 65%. He didn't interrupt. He let the words pile up like kindling and then picked the smallest stick. "The warmer at Miss Rook's desk," he said. "You didn't mention if it bore residue." "It bore office morale," I said. "Clean. But it sits 10 steps from Fenwick's inner door and 5 from reception, and anybody who wanted to perform a parlor trick about warmth could have borrowed it without writing a check to ethics." He closed his eyes and flattened a palm on the desk blotter as if he could feel vibrations through paper. "We will not assume Miss Rook warmed Mr. Fenwick's tea to advertise her dominion until we must. People who do thankless work earn the right not to be our first hypothesis. Pike's alibi is counsel," I said. "Vale's is Pilates. Pape's is paperwork and contempt. Dr. North's interest is tidy." "Interest is rarely tidy," Wolfe said. "Did Mr. Pape say my counsel, or did he say a name?" "He said Greeley," I told him. "A firm that sues in italics." "Call Saul Panzer," he said. "Have him watch Mr. Pape and Mr. Greeley separately. Assign Fred to Miss Vale. Tell Ori to loiter at Fenwick's, tastefully. I want to know who circles the safe and who circles the story. Fritz came in to clear plates and left behind a scent of time that forgave the weather." The phone rang as he went out. Dr. North's voice could make marble sound guilty. "Mr. Goodwin, a small problem. My assistant went to retrieve the photographs I took yesterday, the foot rim close-up and a glaze macro, and the sleeve is missing. We keep duplicate digital files, but the prints are gone. Gone like we misfiled, or gone like a mouse learned to read?" gone like someone opened a drawer and took only those, she said. We have cameras in the study rooms. I'll know more soon. But I wanted you to know that someone thinks images are as dangerous as objects. I passed it along to Wolfe. He opened his eyes and looked at nothing, which is how he looks when he's seeing something very clearly. A selective trespass, he said. He trims protrusions that might snag his story. He wishes to control evidence, not steal property. That is a curator's crime performed by a coward. Before I could ask him to nominate the cowards in our set, the bell rang. Fritz returned with an envelope he had speared on the corner of a tray like a negligent canapé. No postmark. Same good paper as Fenwick's note. Same sparing appetite for punctuation. Advise your client to sell before 4. Warmth escalates. I lifted it. A whisper of green dryness rode up. A ghost of vetiver. Miss Vale's calling card, I said. Or a deliberate smear, Wolfe snapped. Scent is a democratic contaminant. He turned the sheet with 2 fingers as if bad taste might rub off. 4 o'clock is an arbitrary tyrant. He is pushing. We will push back. The phone conducted another anxiety to our desk. This time it was Evie Rook, whose competence had lost a button. Mr. Goodwin, a courier arrived 5 minutes ago with a receipt on Consolidated Assurance letterhead authorizing transfer of the teacup to their vault for temporary custodial evaluation. He said Mr. Wolfe had arranged it. I did not bite. You did well, I said. Save the receipt. Have Pike confirm or deny the paperwork. Already did, she said. He denies. And someone adjusted the frame over Mr. Fenwick's safe while I was on the phone with Dr. North. It's half a degree off. We keep it level. Anyone else would call that fussy, I told her. But today it's evidence. Hold the fort. Don't show the cup to anyone unless I'm standing on your rug. I hung up and gave Wolfe the duplicate of my frown. Someone is counterfeiting your manners and Pike's letterhead. Also, someone with a tenderness for degrees is testing Fenwick's defenses. Wolfe reached for the bell cord and left it alone. Panzer, he said, and I was already dialing. I gave Saul the roster and the assignments. He grunted in the right places, which is how he says yes. When I hung up, Wolfe said, Ridge and Mayer. Verify who serviced the safe last month and whether they issued a duplicate dial key or altered the spindle. Also ask whether a Miss Rook has ever commissioned an emergency call without Mr. Fenwick present. I got my hat. He stopped me with a palm at my shoulder. Before you go, call Mr. Fenwick. He will bring the cup here at 6. Fritz will prepare a place on the red cabinet in the office. Dr. North will come at 7 to examine it under our lamp. If either Mr. Pape or Miss Vale learns of the change of venue, it is because you told them. Choose your leak. I don't like baiting with our floorboards, I said. Nor do I, Wolfe said, and the way he said it told you exactly how little he enjoys anything that isn't butter and obedience. But he has murmured at our door. Let him attempt consonants. On my way down the steps, I checked the vestibule. The outer door had been shut. The inner door chain was still on the notch Fritz uses when he takes deliveries. Either our visitor was very fast with fingers, or he had arrived while Fritz was in the kitchen, or we were dealing with a roomer with legs. I took a cab to Ridge and Mayer and noticed a grey sedan pull away from the curb a beat after mine. I let it catch up on Lexington and then lost it at 34th by letting a delivery truck do something illegal. The sedan reappeared near Madison like a relative at holidays. At the next light, I put my face in the cab's side mirror and wrote the plate on the back of a receipt. Ridge and Mayer was a long counter under a longer line of keys. The man behind the cash register had the expression of a locksmith who believed in the apostolic succession of hinges. I introduced myself without the part about me being lovable. Service call for Fenwick Imports last month, I said. Who went, and did anyone ask for a dial change, a duplicate, or a back service through the fence? He looked at his book like it had never lied to him. Service on a Kessler floor safe. July 23rd. Gilberto went, He's precise. No dial change. Clean and lube. Check tolerances. We don't do duplicates without owner present and notarized. We're not priests. We still like witnesses. Anybody else ask about that safe since? He tapped a pencil. Phone inquiry, 3 days ago. Female voice, clipped. Wanted to know if our man had found irregularities. I told her we don't discuss other people's tolerances. She hung up when I asked for a callback number. Clipped like a museum professional or clipped like a woman who keeps a payroll. Clipped like someone who wears answers as jewelry, he said, and I pictured both Evie Rook and Selina Vale and decided I'd need their ears to choose. When I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the grey sedan had solved its shyness and parked a half-block down. A man in a cap read a newspaper in the universal language of men who don't read newspapers. I walked past, said, "Tell your employer he's paying for yesterday's news," and turned the corner. 2 blocks later, Saul fell into step with me without ceremony. "Plates a lease," he said. "Front company on 47th. Greeley's firm uses them when they need wheels. I'll sit on Pape. Fred's with Vale. Ori says the electric warmer at Fenwick has a fresh scorch under the rubber foot." "Meaning somebody did a sample boil," I said. "Meaning somebody likes his tea hot and his messages hotter," Saul said. "You bringing the cup here is going to make someone sweat." "Good," I said, because Wolfe had decided to pull our visitor's shadow into our hall, and if there's one thing a warm teacup had taught me, it's that some men prefer suggestion to force. Until suggestion stops working. At 3:30, the brownstone had that expectant hush it gets before dinner and after trouble, and the phone began earning its keep. Saul first. Pape had spent an hour at Greeley's office with a junior partner and a man Saul described as the kind of courier who keeps receipts for his receipts. They were joined by a woman in a navy suit who arrived alone and left with the men. "Name?" I asked. "No name," Saul said, but her heels made decisions for her. He was shadowing them toward Midtown East. Fred checked in next. Miss Vale had taken a late lunch at a hotel where the lighting exists to flatter money. She met a young gallery director whose jacket cost more than my refrigerator and handed him an envelope slim enough to be either sincerity or stationery. "They spoke like people who share enemies," Fred said. Then she bought a book on Napoleonic porcelain from the lobby shop and left it in the back seat of her car like a calling card. Wolfe listened to these and took a sip of beer, which is how he nods. I called Dr. North to see whether Marble had given her anything. The museum's cameras had obliged. A man in a ball cap and mask following an assistant into the study suite, 20 minutes before the prince vanished. He never touched a door. He waited for someone to come out and then slid in with that frictionless confidence of people who've practiced not being noticed. The angle missed his face and his hands. "It's professional," she said, not pleased. And he knew exactly which drawer to open. Which sounded less like a random tourist and more like somebody who'd phoned to ask about irregularities 3 days earlier. At 3:58, a knock landed on our door with the brio of a warrant. I went, took measure, and left the chain on. The man outside had the flat eyes of a process server and a portfolio clamped under his arm like he had trained it. "Temporary restraining order," he announced to the brass, "regarding removal or transfer of one porcelain cup. Alleged provenance." "You can serve me through the chain," I said. He slid the packet in. The caption was there, the judge's name was there, and the stamp was there, but the time was 4:15 and the order enjoined activities at an address on East 38th. If Pap wanted to freeze Fenwick's hands, he should have checked the weather in our neighborhood. I carried it to Wolfe, who examined it as if it were a beat he was considering forgiving. "Greeley indulges in premature triumph," he said, putting the packet down where it could not contaminate the towed paperweight. "Useful. It means he expects movement, which means Mr. Pepe expects information." "Whom did you choose for the leak?" "Miss Vale," I said. I told her, casually, like a man discussing neckties, that Dr. North would get another look at 7 off-site. Good, Wolfe said. Telling Mr. Paper would have given him a timetable. Telling Miss Vale gives him an appetite. The bell rang again, softer, and Fritz brought an envelope on a tray, like a penitent. No stamp. We were becoming the neighborhood's favorite mailbox. The same grade of bonded paper, the same lean punctuation. Advise your client to sell before 4. Warmth escalates. We were past 4. If the author wanted to escalate, he could start by learning to tell time. I lifted it, and a suggestion of green dryness rode up my fingers. Vetiver, I said. It is, Wolfe said, irritated. So is any store that sells soap in glass bottles. It is a careless smear, not a fingerprint. Archie, look at the C in client. Is it slightly heavy? It is, I said. The top curve was a hair thicker. Cheap typewriter ribbon, he said, or a printer that has been used to draft motions until it fainted. Greeley's assistants labor like mules. Miss Rook runs a clean desk. So does Dr. North. Miss Vale owns technology that doesn't pant. Mr. Papes hires men to pant for him. Keep your resentment for the right neck. Before I could congratulate him on insulting 4 people in one breath, Evie Rook phoned, clipped like a metronome. A man arrived with a pelican case and a badge that looked borrowed from a closet. He asked for the cup for transfer to examination. He had paperwork on Consolidated Assurance letterhead. I told him to wait and phoned Pike. Pike denied everything and said he was on his way. The man left without the case. Also, while I was on the phone, someone put our wall level back where it belongs. Meaning they opened the frame again and rehung it as a form of etiquette, I said. Meaning they're testing whether we notice, she said. We do. Keep noticing, I told her, and hung up. Someone's rehearsing, I told Wolfe. Small intrusions to learn our reflexes. At the museum, at Fenwick's, and here, Fritz said quietly from the doorway, which is when I turned and saw the look. You don't get that look from Fritz often. It is the one reserved for men who commit crimes against garlic. What? I asked. The plate, he said. The small electric plate I used to demonstrate. I keep it in the right-hand drawer near the stove. It is not there. It was the sort of sentence that doesn't raise your voice and somehow empties your lungs. I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer. I've opened that drawer 1,000 times to borrow things I shouldn't and return them late. The space where the plate lived was an oval of clean wood edged by the honest dust of an honest kitchen. On the counter, a faint ring. When I put my palm to it, the warmth had left, but it had left recently. I went back to the office. Wolfe had not moved. Someone came into our kitchen, he said, opened a drawer and removed a plate. In my house. Phooey. It could be Fritz mislaid, I started, because I like my skull where it is. I do not mislay heat, Fritz said, almost prim, and that settled that. The outside door admitted sound from the street without admitting air. I checked the vestibule chain. It was hooked in the second notch, the one Fritz uses only when he's alone. I checked the back. The bolt was set. There are men who can step through locks like curtains if you give them 10 seconds and a reason. We had given them both. Wolfe reached for the bell cord and caught himself, then let it go with a little disgusted flick. He stalks in half steps, he said. He wants us to understand he can warm what we touch wherever we touch it. He wishes to insinuate inevitability. Then he'll love this, I said, and dialed Fenwick. He answered on the second ring with a voice that had been rung. 6 o'clock, I said. Bring the cup. Come with Miss Rook. Do not let anyone know your route. If a man with a pelican case taps you on the shoulder, hit him with it. He breathed out something like relief and said they'd be here at 6, and hung up to go learn what it feels like to look over your shoulder in your own lobby. Saul called again. Update, he said. Pape's courier met the sedan from Greeley at 47th and stuck his portfolio through the window like a communion plate. Then they split. I followed the courier to a copy shop on 2nd, where he made duplicates of something that already had a stamp on it. "Restraint orders," I said. "He's mass-producing confidence." "Or letters," Saul said. "The clerk says he's been in twice this week with consolidated letterhead weeping from the copia." I thanked him and hung up with an appreciation for men who use duplicators to make ethics multiply. The rest of the hour wasn't restful. Ori phoned from Fenwick's to say the building's lobby camera was having intermittent technical difficulties, by which he meant a hand had learned to find the plug. Pike called to announce he would be delighted to join us at 7 to observe Dr. North's exam, with the hysteria in delighted sitting on a folding chair. Dr. North left a brisk message confirming her arrival and adding, "Tell Mr. Wolfe that if anyone attempts to move an object while I observe it, I will assume he wants me to notice his character more than his porcelain." Miss Vale did not phone, which told me she knew how to be quiet on purpose. At 5:40, a grey sedan idled half a block down with the patience of a lamp post. It was a cousin of the one that had tried to grow attached to my cab. I stood at the parlor window and watched rain tick the slate and told the air that at 6 a man with shaky hands would carry a cup up our steps past a plate that had gone walking and an order that disapproved of our address. It is one thing to invite a storm into your house. It is another to lay the table for it. Wolfe remained as he was, eyes hooded, lips in a line that meant he would prefer butter to bullets and intended to serve neither, and the brownstone waited for the knock that would present us with both our client and the man who believed warmth was a weapon. At 6 on the dot, the knock came, quick and dutiful, like a man reporting for his own cross-examination. I cracked the door on the chain. Fenwick's face was paler than it had a right to be at that hour. Evie's was the shade people use when they've decided to spend calm, like money. She had the Pelican case by the handle. I checked the street over their shoulders. The grey sedan lounged half a block down, doing impersonations of a parked car. I let our pair into the vestibule and set the case on the little oak table while I slid the chain. "Any trouble?" I asked. "Only the feeling of being observed," Evie said. "It's become a hobby." Wolfe called from the office. "Archie," which meant stop narrating and begin existing usefully. I picked up the case to bring it in and felt it. Not hot, not even warm, but not the dead neutrality of plastic out of rain. It had a hum of heat the way a cat has a hum of life. I set it on Wolfe's red cabinet. He had cleared space as if for an altar and placed 2 stacks of fresh lintless pads like hymns. "Do not touch the porcelain," he told everybody who could hear. "Mr. Fenwick, Miss Rook, relax your faces. You are not defendants." Fenwick found a chair and missed it by an inch, then tried again and succeeded. Evie didn't sit. She watched my hands as I spun the latches and lifted the lid. We had cushioning, a nest of foam cut to shape, a strap, and in the heart of it the cup, veiled in tissue the color of discretion. I held a palm over it. The air above was warmer than the air in the room. Not a fever, a suggestion. "Fritz," Wolfe said. Fritz arrived with cotton gloves, a kitchen thermometer, and, because he is Fritz, a look that promised penance to any man who had trespassed in his drawers. Wolfe dipped the thermometer into the hollow of the case, not touching the cup, and read the red line. 81, he said. "Our rooms are 72. Mr. Goodwin, assure me you did not rest the case on a radiator." "Only on the vestibule table while I unhooked the chain," I said. Fritz's eyes flicked to mine and then to the hall. He doesn't accuse. He observes in a tone that makes guilt confess itself. I went back out, felt the top of the oak, cool, and then the underside of the apron, where I found a short cord sneaking toward the floor outlet and something taped flat against the wood. I peeled it free and came back with it in my hand, and if gloating were polite, I would have done a lap with the thing held high. Fritz didn't gloat. He took it like a hostage recovered intact. "My plate," he said, quiet and savage. The cord was still the faintest degree above room temperature. Wolfe's mouth flattened. He warmed the case so Dr. North's examination would be compromised by the memory of a stove, he said. "He escalates warmth in our vestibule." In my house, Evie's gaze narrowed a fraction. "That means someone was here before we arrived." "It means someone was here before lunch," I said, and taped a greeting under my furniture. He knew we'd set the case down for exactly long enough to do what he wanted, because that's how long it takes a man to move a chain when he doesn't want to look like an idiot. "Archie," Wolfe said, "no touching of the cup until Dr. North is present. The warming is a confession. I will not allow it to become an alibi." He pointed one finger and the cabinet became a courtroom. I closed the lid to trap what heat remained where it could be measured. The phone rang. "Saul. Heads up. Pop didn't stay married to Greeley. He peeled off and took a walk around your block with a woman in navy who doesn't blink much. They didn't go to your stoop. They looked at it like a painter looks at a window he wants to steal light from. Then they moved on." "Did the woman's heels make decisions for her?" I asked. Saul allowed himself half a grunt. "Same one. I'll keep them honest," I told Wolfe. He didn't comment, which is a comment. He looked instead at Fenwick. "Describe exactly the case's custody from your office to my door." "I took it from the safe myself," Fenwick said. "Evie saw me lock it. She carried it to the car. We rode together. We did not stop. When we arrived, Mr. Goodwin set it down on the table while he unhooked the chain." "And in your office?" Wolfe asked. "Between opening the safe and leaving the room?" "No one entered," Evie said. "Ori was in the hall. I signed for nothing, spoke to no one, and stared at the case as if it were a sore tooth. If someone warmed it, they did it here." Fritz's hand brushed the plate again, as if to keep it from fleeing a second time. I handed him the roll of tape that had done the false hospitality, and he took it to the kitchen like evidence to be incarcerated. At 6:40, the bell brought us 2 visitors with equal enthusiasm for paper. Julian Pike with a briefcase that knew its purpose, and a junior from Greeley's stable with a stack of copies and a hope. Pike's face was the color of good linen. The junior's was the color of a fresh stamp. I kept the lawyer's hopeful arm in the vestibule and read the top page. New address, new time, same prayer. He announced himself as a matter of courtesy. I gave him our chain as a matter of habit. "At 7, I said, Dr. North will examine an object. If your order grows legs, it can try stairs." He took that back to his sedan, which purred like a cat that hadn't decided whom to scratch. Pike, being useful if not welcome, got admitted. He peered into the case with the reverence of a man checking his own premium. "It's warm," he said, startled and indignant in equal parts. "It was warmed," I corrected. "Here, in our vestibule, with an item recently stolen from our kitchen and taped under our own table." I did not look at him when I said it, but human nature supplies mirrors where needed. He looked injured, which could have been conscience or profession. 7 arrived with a soft knock and a smell of wet wool and marble polish. Dr. Beatrice North's eyes took in the cabinet, the pads, the thermometer, the positions of people, and last of all, the case. She listened to my summary without commentary and then asked, "How long since the warming source was removed?" 20 minutes, I said. "Good," she said. "If there were a desperate attempt to disguise glaze anomalies with transient heat, the effect will be in its death throes. Transient cheats prefer a moving target to a microscope." "Will the heat harm it?" Fenwick asked, sounding more like a man than a collector. "If it were overheated, crazing might reveal itself as an unnatural bloom," she said. This was more like a warm hand. "I will proceed." Wolfe inclined his head the 1/4 inch that means go ahead and be correct. I stood by with gloves. Dr. North washed her hands with the thoroughness of a surgeon and then had me lift the lid. The cup came out of its tissue and sat upon our red cabinet in the patient pose of things that have learned to be looked at. White, with a delicate vine in a green that had learned composure, and, along the rim, a gilt that knew when to be quiet. No touching, she reminded me in a tone that wanted to be kind and didn't know how. She bent, peered at the foot rim, and then at the interior where light goes to tell tales. The abrasion I noted yesterday is still the same abrasion. The glaze at the foot is not crawled, it is thin. The warmth did not erase sins or invent virtues. 65% holds, hold it until you have to let it go, Wolfe said. She moved to the handle, her breath held the way a musician holds a silence, and then to the junction where porcelain and paint negotiate truth. There is a repair, she said, not triumphant and not dismayed. Old, done expertly. The gold on the lip has been refreshed, but not yesterday. The piece is what it claims with caveats that connoisseurs pretend not to read. Fenwick closed his eyes. Pike opened his mouth and then closed it, which might be the bravest thing an insurance man does in a year. I stepped back to the office door to breathe and make sure the street hadn't invented a parade. The grey sedan was still idling at its spot like patience-made machinery. A second car had joined it, black and shy. I watched a moment longer and caught the small, friendly flare of a cigarette and 2 doors down. Egyptian by the length of the ash. Company, I said to the room at large. The audience appreciates our staging. Let them, Wolfe said. They have warmed our vestibule. We will warm their ears. He settled deeper into the chair, which on him looks like intent going to seed, and closed his eyes for a beat. When he opened them, the room got narrower around the edges. When we are finished here, Mr. Goodwin will invite our circle to call tomorrow at 11. He will do so as if it were their idea. Tonight, we will not chase shadows. We will measure them. Evie exhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. Dr. North bent again to her foot rim. Pike recounted the premiums in his head. Outside, the cigarette tip glowed, dimmed and glowed, like a small, contented signal fire in the rain. Dr. North finished her slow circuit like a surveyor who prefers inches to vistas, and stepped back, hands clasped. You can put it away, she said. I'll write a provisional statement tonight and a final after a second look under daylight. Pike made a noise like an invoice, remembering it had feelings. The cup stays here, Wolfe said. Mr. Fenwick, if you wish to relieve me of the responsibility, say so now and take it back into your nest of notes and counterfeit courtesies. Fenwick shook his head so hard his collar thought about resigning. Here, he said. Tonight at least. I can't keep looking at doors. Good, Wolfe said. Mr. Pike, send your anxiety home. You may return at 11 tomorrow. He let the number sit. When we shall host an assembly. Pike opened the briefcase and closed it without accomplishing anything measurable, which is a lawyer's exercise regimen. I will inform Consolidated, he said. We prefer not to be surprised. Then cultivate better habits, Wolfe told him. That was Pike dismissed. He backed out with the caution of a man trying not to step on his own duty. I phoned the circle. Pape took my invitation like a duke takes a subpoena. One condition, he said. No ambushes. I don't attend theatre that ends with handcuffs. You're safe, I told him. We don't clap. Miss Vale was delighted in a way that made my ear feel admired. 11 suits me, she said. Shall I bring champagne for consolation or victory? Bring your patience, I said. It'll be the rarer bottle. Dr. North's yes was clipped and sincere. If there are performances, I will require silence during the object's time, she said, as if she could impose that on anyone in our office, including me. Evie answered for Fenwick with a "We'll be there" that included a footnote about forklifts and hell. The circle set, I hung up and watched the red cabinet breathe the way a room breathes when you put a story on it. Saul called again to report that the Navy suit woman had a name in the building directories. Margot Venn, Greeley's fixer, who shepherded paper like an old sheepdog and occasionally the people who signed it. She can find a back door and a diagram of a shoebox, he said. Papes with her again, pretending to be casual outside your block. I'm touched, I said. Keep them casual. Fritz drifted in with coffee for me and a beer for Wolfe, and stopped at the doorway in that small, significant way he has when something in the house isn't the house. Excuse me, he said to the air, and to Wolfe in particular. Upstairs, the west plant room is 2 degrees high. I set the thermostat this afternoon. It did not set itself. Wolfe's eyes did a slow, dangerous close and open. 2 degrees, he said. In the cattleyas? In the cattleyas, Fritz said. I started for the stairs. Wolfe didn't forbid it, which told me he wanted me to see and he wanted to hear me report it. The west room smelled right, like 100 small oaths kept. The dial on the wall had been tickled to 74. There was no note, no scent, no footprint. The trespass was as tidy as a tailor. I put it back where God and Wolfe intended, and came down feeling the way you feel when someone has put a finger on your pulse without asking. He escalates warmth, Wolfe said when I told him. He writes the same sentence in a new alphabet. He flicked a glance at the cabinet. He will not damage the cup. He thinks in insinuations, not fractures. But he will stage discomfort. Very well. If he must express himself in degrees, we will oblige him with a fever. I looked at him. Meaning? Meaning, he said. We will give him something to attempt and to fail at. He nodded toward the cabinet. Tonight the cup sleeps here. Tomorrow at 10:30, you will be seen leaving with the Pelican case, alone, carrying it low and carelessly. You will go nowhere useful. You will let yourself be followed to a bank lobby and then to a cobbler, and then to a tobacconist, and then home without having done anything a man could explain in a report. You want me to be dull, I said. I can be dull. I've been learning from lawyers. Bah, he said. You will be irresponsibly visible. Panzer will be the shadow's shadow. The point is to give our visitor the delicious sensation that the object is in motion, not to lose it. If he tries our door tonight, I asked. He won't, Wolfe said. He had his romance this afternoon in the vestibule, and he is proud of it. He will smother us with his own cleverness until he thinks we have learned our lesson. Pride is a better lock than Yale. He shifted, and the chair agreed to it. Fritz, the bolts are set, and you will sleep with a pan by your bed in case some idiot introduces smoke to my ceiling. Mr. Goodwin, your cot in the office will remain unfolded. The cup will be in the safe behind me, gently. And Mr. Fenwick, go home. Miss Rook, take him and keep him from thinking of gallant gestures. Evie looked like sleep was a rumor she'd heard of once and distrusted. Fine, she said. She turned to me. The man with the case. If he returns tomorrow morning with better paperwork? He won't, I said. But if he does, make him wait in reception and tell him you've just put on water for tea. Then call me and keep him in the warmth of his own suggestion until I arrive. She allowed herself a thin smile and guided Fenwick out. In the vestibule, I laid a hand under the oak apron, the way you test for a fever breaking. The wood was the temperature of honesty again. When I came back, Dr. North was packing her loop and clamp light with the care of a priest stowing a relic. Tomorrow, she said. I would prefer fewer ovens. You and me both, I said. Pike had left behind a card, and the scent of a man who wishes paperwork could pat his head. The street had kept its audience. The grey sedan idled, and the black cousin had moved a car length closer, as if it had a crush on our curb. Around 8, the Egyptian ember down the block winked a slow good night. Fritz did a last round, sealed a last latch, and retired to his kitchen with a pan and the dignity of a man planning to bludgeon smoke if it appears. Wolfe sat with his eyes at half-mast and his mind in full parade, and I took my cot in the office, with the pelican case on the cabinet and the toed paperweight glaring at the restraining order like it would bite the seal. At 10, the phone gave a small, experimental ring. I took it in a voice that said, "You're waking a house that has opinions." A woman, pleasant and anonymous, asked for Mr. Wolfe's night clerk and inquired what time the transfer team should arrive in the morning. I told her we opened at 11 and preferred calls from people with names. She hung up. I sat there with the dial tone and the feeling you get when a hand pats your pocket to see if your wallet is where it lives. "Tomorrow," Wolfe said from the desk, not opening his eyes. "We will let them perform, and we will applaud only once." He reached for the bell cord as if for punctuation, didn't ring it, and let the room resume its breathing. Outside, the rain softened, the sedans idled like patient sins, and the brownstone settled over us, indignant and watchful, as if it too intended to measure shadows until morning. The night passed like a guest who refuses to introduce himself. I lay on the cot in the office, eyes open at every sigh from the street, every creak from the old bones of the brownstone. Once, around 2, I heard Fritz pad down to the kitchen and rattle something metallic. When I peeked, he was standing by the stove, arms folded, glaring at the empty drawer where his plate had lived, as if daring it to confess. At 4, the grey sedan finally surrendered and rolled off, but the black one stayed, engine off, parked like patience. By dawn, the air in the office was stale from too much watching, too little moving, and the cup sat in its case on the cabinet like it had absorbed the whole performance without blinking. At 9, Wolfe descended, glowering at the sky through the office window as if he had a contract with it. He checked the cabinet, sniffed once, and sat. "No trespass?" he asked. "Not unless burglars have learned to breathe like wood," I said. "Fritz would have heard them anyway." "He's been keeping vigil with a skillet. Pfui. He knows pans are for food." Wolfe settled into his chair with the weight of law. "At 10:30, Archie." So at 10:30 I put on the hat of a man with errands and slung the pelican case low in my hand. Not hugging it like it contained Josephine's breakfast, but loose like a fellow on his way to have it appraised for curiosity. Wolfe wanted visible. So visible he got. I strolled out, locked the door behind me, and let the street see me. The black sedan blinked awake like a lizard in the sun. I took a cab not straight downtown but sideways to the bank on Madison, where I keep nothing more precious than a folder of dead checks. I carried the case inside, asked for change for a 20, and left after 10 minutes with the case still swinging easy. Out again, I made sure to cross in front of a plate glass window so the sedan could admire its reflection. Then to a cobbler near Lexington, where I dropped off shoes that didn't need dropping, and from there to a tobacconist where I bought cigars Wolfe would never smoke. Everywhere I went, I let the case dangle like it was barely earning its keep. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes measure its distance from my fingers. At noon, I ducked into a diner, took a counter seat, and gave the case a rest on the tile. Coffee, sandwich, half an eye on the mirror. A man in a grey cap came in, ordered water, and didn't drink it. He kept looking at the case as if it were whispering insults. He didn't move for it, though. He knew too many eyes were present. I took my time, finished lunch, then walked 2 blocks and turned sharply. Saul peeled off from a doorway and joined me like he'd always been beside me. "Two tails," he said. "Cap and sedan, both careful. Neither brave, they'll report back," I said. "Or they'll try," Saul muttered. "But they won't succeed if I'm watching." At 1, I was back at the brownstone. Fritz opened the door before I rang, which meant he'd been watching from the curtains. I carried the case inside, set it down on the oak table, and put my hand under it. Cool. No surprises. When I took it to the office and placed it back on the cabinet, Wolfe opened one eye. "You let them see?" "They practically took notes," I said. "Saul's got the names on his grocery list." "Good." They will come eager tomorrow. Wolfe closed the eye again. And today we wait. Waiting doesn't sit well with me, but it sits fine with Wolfe. He spent the afternoon among books, beer, and silence. I spent it on the phone with Ori, who reported that Fenwick Imports had received another note. Same paper, same clipped style. The cup will not be safe in new hands. Sell now. This one was slipped under their door at 11 sharp, right when I was performing my matinee for the street. Whoever was writing had a sense of choreography, if not of honesty. By 5, the circle was restless. Pape's lawyer called to confirm tomorrow's attendance, then added a few legal flourishes meant to scare us into trembling. Miss Vale left a message in velvet tones that she was looking forward to a little warmth at your hearth. Dr. North phoned to remind us of her standards. Silence when the object speaks, Mr. Goodwin. I won't fight. With dramatics, Fenwick didn't call, but Evie did, short and tight, to say she'd keep him under lock until morning. Dinner came, chicken braised with shallots, and Wolfe ate with the concentration of a man who believed butter was proof of God. He didn't speak until Fritz had cleared the plates. Then he said, "Tomorrow I will expose a man who thinks warmth is subtlety. Tonight, Archie, you will sleep again in the office. The case will stay on the cabinet. We will not invite him twice, but if he insists on visiting, we will measure his insolence." I unfolded the cot and settled in for another vigil. Around 11, the black sedan moved off, leaving only the grey, its engine ticking faintly like a bad metronome. At 1, I heard a scrape at the vestibule door, soft as a whisper. I was on my feet before it repeated. A pause, then the faintest tick at the lock, like a pen scratching. I stepped to the door and spoke through the wood. "You're rehearsing badly." The sound froze, then retreated. When I opened the door a crack a minute later, the chain still in place, the stoop was empty, but the oak table had a slip of paper on it. Same bond. Same neat type. Tomorrow you will see why warmth kills. I brought it in. Wolfe read it once, grunted, and set it under the toad. "He overreaches," he said. "He will not kill, he will demonstrate. And in demonstrating, he will confess." Outside, the sedan idled on. Inside, the cup waited, patient and silent, for morning, when every suspect would sit in Wolfe's office and find their warmth turned back on them. Morning came in grey, and the brownstone put on its company manners. Fritz cleared the red cabinet, dusted where dust wouldn't dare, and arranged chairs as if the room were an argument that deserved symmetry. Wolfe didn't pace. That would require a second person with his bulk. But he gave the impression of pacing from a chair. At 10:30, he had the cup's case on the cabinet and the safe behind him closed, the bolts set, the bell cord within reach, and a glass of beer that had been educated to be patient. They came in on their own rhythms. Dr. North first, early by 5 minutes and exact by temperament. She nodded at the case like a colleague and took the chair farthest from the beer. Pike next, on time and already apologizing to the air for being a man who brings paper to a conversation. Pepe with his lapel unbothered, and Margot Venn in a navy jacket sharp enough to slice a rumour. Miss Vale at the stroke, vetiver trailing like it had paid rent. Fenwick and Evie together, the former with his hat trying not to look nervous, and the latter with her eyes doing all the work his hands weren't allowed to. Saul was a shadow near the vestibule, and therefore not in the room. Fritz was a fact in the doorway. Wolfe raised a finger, and the room shut its mouth. "We will have silence when Dr. North examines the cup, and speech when I direct it," he said. "Until then, you will keep your reflexes to yourselves." I abhor reflexes. Miss Vale smiled in a way that had been known to unsettle ambassadors. "I brought patience," she said. "I was told it was the proper vintage." "You were told correctly," Wolfe said without looking. "Mr. Pape, your counsel has been industrious with orders." "He is not here. His factotum is." "That is acceptable. Just Margot Venn inclined her head with the economy of a woman who bills by the nod. The cup, Wolfe went on, remains what it was yesterday, provisionally what it claims with caveats. The travesty perpetrated upon our vestibule to warm the case has not altered it. What has been altered is my temper. It is now a tool. Mr. Goodwin, I brought forward 2 envelopes and the copy of the restraining order. Same stock, same machine, I said, tapping the notes. This one at Fenwick's door before dawn, this one on our table last night. The heavy C in client and the feathered E in cell match the printer Greeley's clerk's been flogging at a copy shop on 2nd. His courier has been duplicating your confidence. Mr. Pape produced an expression that said he disliked being found predictable. If my firm's clerk made copies, he did so at counsel's instruction, he said. Advising sale is hardly a crime. Advising is air, Wolfe said. Trespass is bone. The photograph theft from the museum, the counterfeit consolidated transfer, the warming stove under my table, the attempt upon my vestibule lock at 1 in the morning. These are not advice. These are actions, and their author prefers electric convenience. The warming of Mr. Fenwick's office cup was from beneath and left an electric tang. The warming of my vestibule table employed a cord. He warmed the Pelican case for the farce of a compromised inspection. He believes heat persuades where reason fails. He is a sentimentalist who aspires to engineering. Miss Vale crossed her legs and made a small cathedral of her hands. So our warm friend is a man. Your perfume tried to tell me so, Wolfe said dry. Scent is promiscuous, logic is not. We will proceed by it. Mr. Pape, your motives are clear. Depress a price, acquire a prize, avoid a market scandal. Mr. Pike, yours, avoid paying for ambiguity. Miss Vale, yours, control the fate of an object you funded. Dr. North, yours, the truth and your position's appetite for it. Miss Rook, your job and your employer's survival. Mr. Fenwick, your pride. None of these is a crime. What entwines crime with motive is opportunity and temperament. He looked at Margot Venn. You represent a temperament. 3 days ago, someone with a clipped voice called Ridge and Mayer to sniff at a servicing report that wasn't hers. Yesterday, someone with a key for back doors watched the museum's cameras and timed a slide into a drawer for prints. Someone leased sedans through a front Greeley favors. Someone copied letters and orders at the same shop that copies Greeley's motions until the ribbon wheezes. And someone, yesterday afternoon, entered my kitchen and removed from a drawer an electric plate. You shepherd paper, but when paper wants legs, it often borrows yours. Venn didn't blink, which was, I had already observed, her signature. You draw lines on a map and call the country mine, she said. It is clever, but if I were to organize anything, it would be organized better. Possibly, Wolfe conceded, but we will not flatter an intruder for doing a bad job in my orbit. Sit. He turned slightly in his chair, a rotation that on him is equivalent to a man standing and advancing a foot. Yesterday at 6, when Mr. Fenwick and Miss Rook arrived, the underside of my vestibule table bore a taped plate, the one taken from my kitchen. The tape was a brand sold at a hardware on Park that opened a line of credit last week to Mr. Pape's courier. I know this because Mr. Panzer asked the clerk to confirm the signature. You may tell your courier he should stop signing like a boy with a fountain pen. It betrays him. Pike cleared his throat in the tone of a man hoping for absolution even when he hadn't sinned. None of which proves harm intended to the object. Warming a case is theatrics. Precisely, Wolfe said. Theatrics that escalate, per our anonymous literature, into a demonstration that warmth kills. There are 2 likely ends. Induce a craze by thermal shock, reducing value, or create the appearance of a craze by depositing a soluble salt and applying heat. Crude, but sufficient for the nervous and the insured. I dislike both. Therefore, we will not let it be attempted I had been watching the air above the cabinet like a man watching a pond in case it decides to boil. It did not. What did move was the vestibule. The faintest suggestion of heat shimmer over the oak, a wobble in the line where wood meets air. Saul's shadow, just visible in the hall, shifted. I walked out, slow, and laid a hand under the apron. Warm. I ducked, looked, and saw. New tape, clean and confident, pressed to the underside, and tucked against it a flat, palm-sized sack of translucent gel with a little metal disc in the middle, the kind campers snap to make 10 minutes of hand heaven. I didn't touch the disc. I took the whole contraption off in one piece and brought it back in by the tape, holding it at arm's length like the bad habit it was. We are popular, I said. Souvenir from the vestibule. No cord needed this time. Chemical, Dr. North said, frowning. Sodium acetate or similar. Flex the disc. The supersaturated solution crystallizes. Heat releases. No fumes. No scorch, she met Wolfe's eyes. Any simpleton with internet and impatience could carry one. Any simpleton could, Wolfe said, but I do not host simpletons. He looked down the line of faces and waited. It is remarkable how silence can make a room shed. Alibis. Miss Vale's gaze didn't waver. Pape's jaw set into money. Pike blinked twice and thought of exclusions. Fenwick looked wounded by furniture. Ven's eyes flicked almost imperceptibly toward the vestibule and back, as if checking that the door still existed. Evie Rook looked at the hand warmer like a personal insult. Who arrived last? Wolfe asked, not to any one person. Fenwick and I, Evie said crisply. We were 2 minutes early and waited for Mr. Goodwin to open. We did not bend under your table, Mr. Wolfe. I didn't think you did, Wolfe said, and the way he said it released a fraction of oxygen into the room. Mr. Pape? I do not crawl under tables, Pape said. No, Wolfe agreed. You hire men to crawl for you. Mr. Goodwin, the vestibule was empty after Miss Rook and Mr. Fenwick entered. Saul? I called. Clear, came the voice from the hall. No one since 9:45 but our list. Wolfe inclined his head. Then our warm friend worked very early, or used a moment as slender as courtesy. Miss Venn, you stepped back into the vestibule just now to take a call. I stepped to the door to get a signal, she said evenly. You may sniff my hands if you think glue is my perfume. I don't sniff, Wolfe said. I listen, and I watched you watching Mr. Goodwin when he left the room with a hand warmer. Men who plan effects watch audiences. Women who place devices watch doors. You're careful. You would have tested the disc before arriving, and I would wager a minor dish from Fritz's repertoire that you purchased 3, not 1. Her lips made a movement that didn't reach the rest of her face. And if I did, Counselor, it still fails to name a crime. It names a character, Wolfe said, and character, in the presence of motive and opportunity, closes the circuit. He let that sit, and then let the room have breath. Dr. North, I will ask you to look again at the cup now, while all eyes are restrained by curiosity and good behavior. Mr. Goodwin will hold your lamp. Miss Venn will hold her phone where I can see it. She didn't bristle. She rearranged a line of hair that had not needed rearranging and put the phone on the edge of the desk like a peace offering. Dr. North rose, washed her hands at the little basin Fritz had installed for the purpose, and approached the cabinet. I opened the case, peeled back the tissue, and angled the lamp. The cup sat in our light like it had never heard of warmth or argument. She leaned, slow and exact, checking the places the glaze tells tales. No change, she said. No bloom, no fracture. Whoever intended a demonstration has been denied his theatre. She allowed herself, for the first time since she'd met us, the ghost of a smile. 65 holds, and Leo will let me live with 70 by afternoon. Excellent, Wolfe said. Replace it. He waited until the case was closed and, The latch had made its small, decisive click. Then he folded his hands on his middle and regarded the room with the patience of a judge who knows the verdict and enjoys the walk to it. "At 11:55, he said, "I will begin. Between now and then, you may ask yourselves which of you thinks suggestion is a weapon and warmth is a signature. He has painted himself with his own method. I will not let him cool." At 11:55, Wolfe shifted in his chair, half an inch, the way continents move, and the room came to heel. He let the silence thicken until even Papet's cufflinks looked like they were listening. Then he said, "We have been addressed with warmth." It is time to reply. He didn't look at the cup. He looked at the people. Our intruder writes with heat. First, an electric plate under Mr. Fenwick's untouched tea. No surface disturbance, an electric tang. Then my own plate stolen from my kitchen and taped beneath my vestibule table to pre-warm the case before Dr. North's arrival. Today, a chemical hand warmer fixed in the same position to demonstrate that warmth kills. 3 distinct means. 1 signature. The dramatist's need to be felt without being seen. Add to that the counterfeit consolidated letter, the attempted lock work at 1 in the morning, the theft of the museum's photographs, and the notes urging sale, each typed on the same wheezing printer Greeley's clerk's abuse at a copy shop on 2nd. The sedans were leased through a front Greeley favors. The tape that fastened my plate came from a Park Avenue hardware that opened a line last week for Mr. Pape's courier, whose looped signature the clerk admired to Mr. Panza. He turned very slightly toward Margot Venn. All roads, alas, do not lead to Rome. They lead to a fixer who carries counsel into the world and drags the world back to counsel. Venn's face didn't move, which on her counted as motion. "You've drawn a lovely spider web," she said, "but webs catch what blunders into them." "I don't blunder. If I had wished to compel Mr. Fenwick's prudence, I'd have served paper, not pilfered cookware." "You served paper," Wolfe said, "and found it insufficient. You organized intimidation to accelerate a sale before Dr. North's daylight could harden Mr. Fenwick's resolve. You wished to spare your client litigation in which he might not prevail, and to purchase the cup for him cheaply if he could be panicked into it. In doing so, you overestimated warmth and underestimated my threshold for impertinence. Pape's jaw set. If Miss Venn exceeded instructions, she did so without my knowledge." Wolfe said. "Ignorance is a blanket men pull up when their feet are cold. It does not make them taller, but knowledge or no, you will own the acts you paid to have performed." The man in the museum's corridor did not volunteer. The courier who opened the hardware line does not go on philanthropic. Aaron's Venn's voice was even. "You have insinuations and shopkeepers. Do you have a fact?" Wolfe looked at me. I nodded to Saul in the hall. He came in with the casual precision of a man who can count testimony on one hand and never lose a finger. He held 3 slips. "Affidavit from the copy shop clerk," I said, taking the first, identifying Greeley's runner as the gentleman who printed advice notes the past 2 mornings on the same dying drum as your motions. Statement from the Park hardware. Account opened by the same runner. Purchases including 2 rolls of the exact tape under Mr. Wolfe's table. I held the third up for air. "And for dessert, a receipt from Camp and Trail for a packet of sodium acetate hand warmers sold this morning at 9:30 to a woman matching Miss Venn's description, paid from a petty cash chit on Greeley letterhead." The clerk remembered the navy suit and the heels that made decisions. Venn didn't glance at the paper. She looked at Papet. That flick, brief as a pulse, was the first honest thing she'd let us see. Papet's mouth compressed, then he arranged his expression into money again. "If true," he said, "then Miss Venn exercised judgment that does not reflect this firm's." "Ridiculous," Miss Vale murmured, almost kindly. "You hired judgment. You received it." Dr. North's voice came cool and exact. "And you endangered an object to coerce a decision. For that alone I will testify." Pike swallowed. Consolidated did not. "Mr. Pike," Wolfe said, not raising his voice and somehow raising the temperature, "you will sit. When I require your company's denials, I will tug this cord." Pike Saturday. He looked like a man who had just discovered a rider he hadn't priced. Wolfe returned to Venn. "At my table," he said, "you used a chemical device that warms without scorch. A hand warmer a child could buy. You chose it because it leaves no mark and because you fancy yourself clean. The plates stolen from my kitchen you taped with new tape and set with neat edges. One corner folded under for a tidy removal. I dislike the vanity of that touch. In the museum you started on paper, the prints, because you wished to keep Dr. North's confidence soft and Mr. Fenwick's nerves softer. And at Fenwick's you warmed an untouched cup from beneath to announce yourself. You are consistent. You do not like force. You prefer suggestion engineered to feel like inevitability." She didn't blink. "And what, Mr. Wolfe, do you prefer?" "I prefer penalties," he said. "Here are the terms. 1. Mr. Pape withdraws his injunction and any claim that Mr. Fenwick's cup is forged. 2. Miss Venn drafts an affidavit describing the intimidation she orchestrated and the theft she procured at the museum. 3. Mr. Pape tenders $20,000, 10 to Mr. Fenwick for his trouble, 5 to Dr. North's department for the nuisance and the security breach, and 5 to Fritz for the theft of his property and his temper. 4. You will stop warming my furniture." He closed his eyes and opened them again. "If you decline, I will telephone Inspector Kramer and give him copies of what Mr. Panzer collected and a demonstration with my plate. He dislikes theatrics more than I do." Pepe drew breath to order the ocean back. Venn spoke first, still even. "You are threatening my client with criminal exposure to extort a civil concession." "I am offering him a way to buy his way out of stupidity," Wolfe said. "I will not haggle." Miss Vale leaned back, amused. "You should pay him, Lionel." "Consider it tuition," Pike found his voice. "Consolidated will cover the museums." "No," Wolfe said. "You will cover nothing unless your firm's letter appears again on a door it has no right to level. Then I will invoice you for boredom." He breathed once, a slow, disdainful tide. "Mr. Fenwick?" Fenwick had been gripping the brim of his hat until it wanted to be an ellipse. He looked at Venn, then at Pape, then at Evie, who didn't give him anything except steadiness. "I'm not selling," he said. "Not to Pape. Not today. Dr. North can finish her work, and if after that Miss Vale still wants to discuss a museum loan or a placement, we can talk like adults." "Wise," Wolfe said. "Miss Vale?" She made a small, elegant shrug. "I prefer a loan. Ownership is noisy. Custody is enough." Dr. North inclined her head. "We like quiet." Wolfe lifted a finger. "Miss Venn?" Silence, and then the tiny sound of a decision cracking. "Withdraw the motion," she said to Pape without looking at him. "Authorize the payments." "I'll draft the statements." Pape stared at her and saw the bill he had already paid. He nodded once because anything more would be human. "Fine," he said. "We withdraw." "The money is paid today." Wolfe allowed the room one breath of relief, and then took it back. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "escort Miss Venn to the kitchen. She will return my plate to its drawer and apologize to Mr. Brenner for having disturbed his domain. Then she will sign her statement in my office with my pen." Venn stood. For the first time, her composure looked like something she wore rather than was. She followed me to the kitchen without commentary. Fritz was waiting, impassive as an axe. I opened the drawer. She set the plate in it with a care that would have been insulting if it hadn't been necessary. "I'm sorry," she said, to Fritz and to the room that had kept its heat without her. Fritz nodded once. "Pans are for food," he said, and closed the drawer on the plate and on the last of the warmth that wasn't wanted. When we came back, Wolfe had the pen ready and the toed paperweight glowering at Greeley's order as if it were considering dinner. Venn signed. newspaper called his office and withdrew. Pike called his and cancelled a memo that had barely learned to walk. Dr. North said she would return at 2 with daylight and a loop. Miss Vale said she would have a car sent for a small celebration that did not require champagne. Fenwick let go of his hat, which resumed being circular, and Evie exhaled a breath she might have been holding since the first note. Wolfe took a sip of beer. "Warmth," he said, not to anyone in particular, "belongs to kitchens and to human decency. Applied as pressure, it curdles both. I do not forgive curdling." He set the glass down and closed his eyes, which is how he ends ceremonies. I folded the statement, filed the receipts, and listened to the brownstone cool, inch by inch, back to the temperature it prefers for truth. The room emptied by degrees, each departure loosening the tension that had held since morning. Papet went first, shoulders squared but thinner than when he had entered, Margot Venn at his side carrying the weight of signatures and silence. Miss Vale lingered just long enough to let her perfume remind us she had been amused the whole time, then drifted out with a smile that made triumph look like a parlor trick. Dr. North packed her loop with the satisfaction of a professional who had survived a storm without letting her science drown. Pike muttered about policies into his phone until Evie steered Fenwick toward the door, her grip on his arm firm enough to be mistaken for loyalty, and maybe was. When the front door closed behind them, the brownstone inhaled again. Fritz collected stray glasses and straightened the rug with the dignity of a man restoring a church after tourists. Saul came in from the vestibule, handed me the last of his notes, and departed without fanfare, his work the kind that doesn't need applause. Wolfe sat immovable, his eyes half shut, the bulk of him suggesting not rest but digestion, of facts, of characters, of people who had dared to intrude. I stood by the cabinet, hands in pockets, watching the cup sit in its tissue like a relic that had never wanted any of this attention. "So," I said, "we've proven Warmth doesn't sell cups." "What now?" "Now," Wolfe murmured, "we let the object resume its silence. Dr. North will complete her evaluation. Mr. Fenwick will retain his pride. Miss Vale will shape her narrative. And Mr. Pape will lick his wounds, knowing he cannot afford another tutor like me." I grinned. "And Miss Venn?" "She has learned," Wolfe said, eyes opening just enough to cut, "that warmth is not persuasion, it is exposure. Her profession may forgive her." "I will not," Fritz returned, wiping his hands. "Dinner at 7, he announced, as if that were the true ending. Wolfe inclined his head, pleased by the reminder that the world still obeyed certain laws. He reached for his beer, lifted it, and sipped. "Heat," he said, "is a servant. It bakes bread, it softens butter. It should never be employed as a threat. When it is, it burns the fool who wields it." He set the glass down with finality. I folded my notes, shut the case on the cup, and thought about the night before. The whispers at the lock, the shimmer under the table, the smugness of a hand-warmer taped where it didn't belong. All undone now by Wolfe's patience and a little logic. "Well," I said, "at least no one tried to drop the thing in boiling water." "Phooey," Wolfe said, closing his eyes again. "That would have been merciful. I prefer watching them squirm," and with that, the brownstone returned to its rhythm. Fritz in the kitchen, Wolfe in his chair, orchids waiting upstairs, and me at my desk, scribbling the last lines. Outside, the city steamed in its usual fashion, but inside the house, the temperature was once again what Wolfe liked best. Calm, cool, and entirely under his control. 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 Under